Dear colleagues, distinguished delegates, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, according to where you are. Welcome to this G20 Circular Cities Conference. First of all, let me thank you all for participating in this conference, and of course, many thanks to the OECD and the Green Building Council for making it possible. Thank you, Marco, thank you, Oriana, for the great efforts in doing this. Italy decided to push forward an ambitious plan and rich agenda on the G20 presidency on resource efficiency dialogue and circular cities, promoting several workshops in order to raise the level of ambition and discussion on specific topics of common interest. Promoting a circular economy in cities is a key priority for the Italian G20 presidency, and our aim today is to put forward and push forward some suggestions for national governments to accelerate ecological transition in general and, of course, a resource efficiency dialogue and circular cities paradigm actuation. Reaching this goal requires addressing several priorities. The COVID-19 pandemic has definitely highlighted the importance of cities as resilient environment and centers for the industrial, social innovation and strategic labs for circular economy. Of course, the implementation in cities of efficient use of natural resources, enhanced waste prevention and improved waste management will be the core of a circular city approach. To reach this goal, we have to prevent waste production by shifting from the ownership to service-based model, changing production and consumption patterns toward a less wasteful society, regulating single-use plastic, keeping resources in use as long as possible by extending the useful life of goods through eco-design implementation and through the implementation of extended producers' responsibility paradigm and law. For example, in the building sector, to extend the useful life of buildings, renovation of historical and traditional buildings, we have to push on the maintenance of cultural heritage assets, paying attention on the choice of the materials, as well as modular buildings that can be reproposed at the end of their life. We have also to transform waste into new resources by fostering recycling and transform wastewater into new material, organic into new fertilizer in order to prevent soil consumption and also soil pollution. To make this happen, of course, governments and citizens will need to be encouraged for a transparent information, conducive regulation in compliance with health and environmental standards. Of course, we have to provide as government financial support in identifying also the right economic incentives that can change the behavior of the citizens. We are convinced that the behavior of the citizens and the education of a young generation are key steps toward the ecological transition. Of course, rethinking and structuring cities under a 15-minute city perspective is essential to make them inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable, and also to have a just transition. That is one of the goals that we have to pursue. Smart circular communities should also be fostered in countryside areas where the abundant presence of organic and natural resources can be exploited to harness different forms of energy, and as such to encourage green and sustainable built environment solutions. I am convinced, and I know that today we will listen to several successful experiences, and that the exchange of views on case study experiences and also managing approach towards circular cities will push forward the ecological transition and also the work of the G20 presidencies in this field. Let me thank again the OECD for having provided the policy document that will help us toward this goal that we announced. And sincerely, I thank all of you for your participation and the comment and the discussion that will come during this meeting. And I wish you all a fruitful discussion. Now, I leave the floor to the director of the Center of Entrepreneurship, Lamia, Director Lamia Kamal Chouhi, for their, please take the floor.
Okay. Thank you so much, Laura. Dear Laura, distinguished speakers and participants, I'm really delighted to welcome you all to today's G20 Circular Cities Conference that we are co-hosting with the G20 Italian Presidency and Green Building Council of Italy. Thank you again for Italy's leadership and political commitment to raise the profile of cities in the transition to a circular economy. In the post-COVID-19 crisis, business as usual, based on a linear economy of take, make, and dispose is no longer an option. In response to the pandemic, many G20 countries committed to a green recovery through stimulus packages of unprecedented scale. Yet only a very small share of the recovery measures announced so far, around 1% of total funds, addresses resource efficiency and waste management. G20 countries need to step up their efforts to seize the opportunities of a circular economy that creates value while reducing the environmental impact of the use of resources and waste disposal. So the OECD report towards a more resource efficiency and circular economy, the role of the G20 that we prepare for this G20 presidency, outlines how G20 countries can set a common policy vision on resource efficiency and the circular economy for different levels of government. And my colleague Shardul Agrawala of the OECD Environment Directorate will present the key messages of this report later. This report includes a specific chapter on the role of cities. Why? Because cities are agents of change. They work alongside national governments to shape and adopt the new business models, partnership, skills and capacities needed for a just transition to a low carbon economy. And the chapter builds on the expertise of the OECD Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions and Cities, and our dedicated program on the circular economy in cities and regions. Since 2018, we have been working hand in hand with over 1,000 stakeholders to advance a place-based approach to the circular economy. And as part of this program, we published last year a synthesis report on the circular economy in cities and regions that builds on a survey across more than 50 cities. We have produced case studies in cities like Valladolid and Granada in Spain, in Groningen in the Netherlands, in Umeå in Sweden, in Glasgow, United Kingdom, Montreal, Canada, Tallinn in Estonia, as well as in Ireland. And we organize regular roundtables to engage with cities and experts and share knowledge and experience. So there are many, many reasons why cities matter for the circular economy. Cities produce 80% of greenhouse gas emission, consume 2/3 of the energy, and generate 50% of global waste. At the same time, we know the global population is becoming more urban. The population living in cities has more than doubled over the last 50 years and is expected to increase by another 40% by 2050, according to our projections. This means new infrastructure, services, and housing will be needed, and the pressure on natural resources will keep increasing. At the same time, city governments have core competencies and funding for most policy areas underlying the circular economy. They typically manage solid waste, water infrastructure, spatial planning, land use, and they enforce regulation on the building and construction sectors. Our data also show that on average across the OECD countries, some national governments are responsible for 55% of climate and environment related spending and for 64% of climate related investments. So cities have really a critical role to play. And the good news is that cities are already acting. For instance, London and Milan use financial and economic instruments like loans, grants, venture capital, and tax rebates to incentivize or discourage specific behaviors and business activities. Kitakyushu in Japan has introduced circular economy requirements in public procurement and public tenders. Paris, Toronto, and Amsterdam have developed their own circular economy strategies in line with national objectives. In Umeå in Sweden, the circular economy is a means to achieve the city's goal to be fossil-free by 2040. And in London, it is estimated that 40,000 new jobs will be created by 2036 in the areas of reuse, remanufacturing, and materials innovation. So this is really great news. All these examples are really great news, but there is still a long way to go to unlock the potential of the circular economy in cities. And as part of our work program, we have conducted a survey with over 50 cities and regions worldwide that shows that 2/3 of them, actually 73%, do not have enough funding to implement the transition to the circular economy. This means that too often, only small-scale, low-risk projects materialize with limited impact in terms of job creation and positive environmental effects. There are also important regulatory obstacles at the local and national level. For instance, around the type of waste that can be transformed into new resources, or how to reuse construction waste, reclaimed water and sludge compatibly with health and ecological standards. In addition, cities that are engaged in the circular economy tend to follow a kind of sectoral rather than a systemic approach. For instance, the circular economy is not just about waste, but also about water and other materials. And yet, in 2/3 of the cities we analyzed, municipal departments are not collaborating among themselves to make sure that the outputs of one sector can be also input for another one. So to advance the circular economy, cities and national governments have to work hand in hand. And this is why today's conference in the framework of the G20 is so important. Cities can be a role model and promote a circular economy culture. Cities can encourage systems thinking across the public, private, and non-profit sectors. And cities can put in place the economic instruments and public procurement conditions needed for the circular economy to grow and thrive. But cities cannot do it alone. Realizing the opportunity of a circular economy requires partnership and cooperation across different levels of governments and stakeholders. National governments can and must leverage the potential of cities to engage through incentive mechanism. For instance, many countries such as France, Spain, and the Netherlands have developed strategies on the circular economy that are stimulating actions at the local level. But much more remains to be done. National governments can accompany the transition through regulatory tools. For example, many countries are phasing out single-use plastic bags to decrease material use and prevent pollution. Some countries, such as the United Kingdom, tax the extraction or use of natural resources. Such tools can provide significant incentives for local firms to seek new, cleaner solutions. National governments can also contribute to educational and capacity building programs, both for local administration and local entrepreneurs. Finally, governments can help create the necessary evidence by harmonizing data collection and indicator at national and also at the local level. Let me conclude by saying that COVID-19 offers an opportunity for cities to rethink urban policies toward more sustainable production and consumption patterns. The pandemic triggered initiatives that can also be beneficial for the circular economy, such as the extension of bike lanes and a focus on local food production. We can use this momentum to accelerate the transformation of G20 cities and increase their resilience. And the OECD stand ready to help and to strengthen cooperation with the G20 on this very important agenda. And I look forward to today's discussion, especially ahead of the G20 ministerial meeting in Naples on 22 July. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lamia, for pointing out the strong role of cooperation between different government levels to provide and to push forward the circular economy. Now we have a little, maybe 1 or 2 minutes to pass to the next panel, Circular Economy in Cities, the State of the Play. And I leave the floor to Marco Mari as a coordinator of this first slot of discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Madame D'Aprile. Thank you, Madame Chaoui. Thank you for your words. Now we can start the first round of discussion. I'm Marco Mari. I'm the president of Green Building Council Italia, and I am a member of the G20 Environment Expert Committee. So in this section, I'm honored to have the role of moderator of so many influential colleagues. And we have some simple rules to remind to our colleagues to take the microphone not speaking and everything you can need to have, you can write on our chat, internal chat. So please, let's start this panel. And in recent years, international organizations have been supporting national and local governments with their transition towards the circular economy. Thank you to OECD and other international organizations, something like European Commission, European Investment Bank, and other, for example, Ellen MacArthur Foundation and others, we can find maybe the right path for a new and sustainable future. The international organizations are a key for a greener future and for a more inclusive and sustainable society for all. And they have an important role to play in the transition of a carbon neutral and circular economy future. To understand how we can strive for a better sustainable future, we are going to discuss with our colleagues from OECD, UNEP, European Commission, European Investment Bank, and Ellen MacArthur Foundation in this panel. So I kindly remind the speaker, we have only 5 minutes each. So maybe some statement can be helpful for the discussion that we try to have at the end. And the first speaker is Madame Oriana Romano, Head of Unit of Water Governance and Circular Economy at the Center on Entrepreneurship, MES, Region and Cities, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. And Madame Romano will tell something about governance of the circular economy in cities and region. And please, Madame Romano, take the stage.
Thank you very much, Marco. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes.
I'm very happy to contribute to this discussion, and I will kindly ask the organizer to upload the slides. Thank you, and go to the next. So I have 5 minutes just to share a few messages that our director, Lama Kamal Shawi, shared. I will do this in a little bit more detail. So the OECD study on the circular economy in cities and regions that has been published in 2020, and it is based on a survey across more than 50 cities and regions from OECD and non-OECD countries, basically shows that there are several levels of progress towards the transition to a circular economy. Which we know it is not necessarily a new concept, but for many governments at different levels, local, regional, and national, it is still an incipient concept and framework. So from our data, 57% of the cities that have responded to our survey are so-called newcomers, meaning that are starting now to identify how to transition towards a circular economy, identifying tools, instruments, and different partnerships. 37% of those cities have already in place long-term visions and strategies in the form of programs, roadmaps. For example, this is the case of Amsterdam in the Netherlands, London, and we will hear about this in the next session, Paris in France, and many others. What we identified also that beyond the waste sectors, and we know that the circular economy is not just a synonym of waste, sustainable waste management, but goes much beyond that. One of the sectors that has been highlighted by the cities participating in this report that has a key role in the transition towards a circular economy is the built environment. So how to apply circular principles to the planning, the design, the operation, and the end of life of buildings. What we also have to highlight is that many of those initiatives, for example, food waste reduction plans or modular buildings, are still based on pilot and experimentations. So what is important is to go from pilots to business as usual. In other words, from starting up to scaling up. And one of the instruments that have been signaled as able to do so is definitely public procurement and digitalization. This is, for example, for 51% of our sample. Going to the next slide. you can see that as a result of our survey, lack of technical solution is somehow the least of the problems. Technical solution to make things lasting longer, recycling, refurbishing, repurposing are definitely available. What is a problem is to find the right governance conditions for put this system in place. So for shifting from a linear to a circular system. Some of the obstacles are, for example, in relation to insufficient financial resources. Previous slide, please. Insufficient financial resources, which is not only a matter of funding availability, but also allocations across levels of government, access to funds, and financial risks for private operators. There is also inadequate regulatory framework when it comes, for example, to matching environmental, health, and economic conditions that would facilitate the use of second-hand material, water reuse, demolition material use, and land allocation in relation to circular economy principles. So the solutions that we have identified together with more than 1,000 stakeholders and cities that participated to the surveys, whose results are collected in the OECD report on the circular economy in cities and regions, as well as specific case studies in the Netherlands, in the UK, in Sweden, and so on. You can find it in the next slide, please, where we argue that cities and regions can promote, facilitate, and enable the circular economy transition. So in terms of promoters, the role of cities will be that of defining not only roles and responsibilities, so who does what, but also long-term views and reducing fragmentation across a wide range of existing already circular economy initiative. Facilitators means to enable cooperation across stakeholders, public, private, and non-profit one, but also coordination across levels of government, something that we will discuss today. And as enablers, cities need to provide the needed condition to put in place solutions such as regulation, financing, capacity building, innovation support for private sector, and data and assessment. I conclude here, Marco, and thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Diana. And now we can spot on some other, we can say, some other initiative. For sure, we can focus on some unsustainable nature of certain environment and social trends. And after this COVID, the pandemic, we raised awareness on the need for more efficient use of resources. And for this reason, I give the stage to the next speaker, Pavel Misiga, Head of Unit of Circular Economy and Bio-Based System, Directorate General for Research and Innovation, European Commission, and to talk about circular cities and regions initiative. Thank you, Mr. Misiga.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. Thank you very much to OECD and G20 for inviting the European Commission to speak on this very important subject. I would like to share our view from the perspective of Research and Innovation Department of European Commission, DG RTD. And you may also ask why not a policy DG? I would say that circular economy is a very important policy file that many sectoral departments are working on. I believe that research and innovation still has important role in that, because circular economy transition is essentially an innovation agenda, and maybe not so much about technological innovation, but societal innovation that has to combine technological invention with innovation in business models, governance, and overall societal societal changes. So first of all, I would like to say that the European economy is not circular. The circular activities are basically niche. Only about 10% of economy can be considered circular in Europe, and I believe that it is valid for other parts of world, especially developed countries and definitely all G20 countries. So the transition process is only starting now, and as I said, circular economy is more niche than mainstream. And the main task is to find a way how we can make it. And according to our understanding of ecological transitions, this is very important process to start experiments, start activities that can be considered as niche, but then to create a favorable conditions and support these experiments, these niches, so that they become a mainstream. They break the traditional patterns, for example, traditional value chains and traditional markets, and change it into circular value chains, circular markets. And we need an overall favorable condition. But what is important, and how we understand the role of cities, is that cities are those pilots where circularity is experimented and done in from different perspective, applying local potential, local favorable conditions. And we see those examples, and the OECD and the survey that they have done show this very well. Cities are also very good place for circular economy because there is very intensive material metabolism, and also cities accumulate material stocks of society. So there is a lot of material and a lot of activities that can be turned circular. Also, cities tend to be more flexible and willing to experiment and innovate. In fact, so this is why we consider cities as pilots in the circular economy transition. Next slide, please. And there are particular enabling conditions that make cities this dynamic actors for change. On one side, they are very important market actors. Cities can reach and influence different kind of economic agents, industry in their territories, etc. But they can also reach citizens and consumers. And this is very important because it is very difficult to change linear value chain into circular without a change going along the whole value chain. So everybody in the value chain has to change, and cities can facilitate collaboration along value chains and can also facilitate the downstream parts of circular activities that depend on action of citizens and consumers. What are challenges for cities is, it was mentioned already, that very often investment is needed for substantial changes, for example, for investment in infrastructure. Sometimes the problem is also the technical capacity of local governments, especially in smaller cities. And we also hear that sometimes the problem is continuity in political priorities in local governments, so that circular city initiatives may be discontinued or are simply not followed with the same level of commitment. And how the national governments can actually help cities and regions to implement the circular economy is that they can create a favorable policy framework, the overall framework in terms of legislation, how to deal with products, with materials, with waste, etc., etc. But they can also, the national governments can provide important incentives, and it can be many kinds of incentives, from fiscal to subsidies, procurement rules, etc., etc. So cities are the key actors, that they have challenges, and many of these challenges can be helped by the national governments. And let me quickly mention the initiative of European Commission, the EU Circular Cities and Regions Initiative, which is a scheme of comprehensive and focused support to urban and regional circular economy demonstration projects. And we intend to allocate about €250 million in form of grants. This will go mainly to demonstration grants, so cities can apply for grants to demonstrate innovative and systemic circular solution at urban and regional level. Then about 50 million we want to offer in form of project development assistance, so that mature demonstrations can develop bankable projects that public and private investors can invest in, and to roll out full-scale circular activities. And then also there will be an element of soft technical assistance, ranging from political engagement of local governments, support in policy development, capacity building of all kinds. That will be delivered by partner organizations, including OECD. We have very good collaboration with OECD, but also the European Investment Bank and other organizations like ICLEI, EIT, KIC, and other organizations. And last but not least, we want to collaborate with public and private investors. And this support will be tailor-made for the status of cities that will apply for support and will participate in the scheme. Some may be in early stage, and then we will focus on political engagement. Others may be in early planning stage, hence the soft technical assistance will be deployed. Others will be in the stage of demonstration, so they will be eligible for grants and project development assistance. And then in the later stage, investment. So we will work with investors to make sure that cities that are mature with or have mature projects will have access to finance. So thank you very much for your attention. I would be happy to answer any questions, but mainly I would encourage all cities, especially European cities, to watch out and use this opportunity and apply for grants or investment when it will be available. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bisiga. So cities are the key actors, and it's important, and we need to combine technical innovation with policy framework, as your words, maybe to achieve a better use of resources, using eco-design, reuse, repurpose, remanufacturing, last but not least, heritage, to have more sustainable, circular and human cities. And for this reason, we need to have resources, as all we think. And so the next speaker is Jonas Byström, Lead Engineer, Circular Economy Division, European Investment Bank. And we are talking about financing the circular economy in cities. Please, Mr. Byström, take the stage.
Thank you, Mari, and many thanks to OECD and G20 for the chance to participate in this webinar on what is a very important topic for Europe and for the EIB as well. I'm happy to focus now my 5 minutes on financing the circular economy in cities, given that many of the previous speakers already pointed at the challenge of accessing finance for cities. But I would like to start with a bit of introduction for EIB. We are the EU's long-term lending arm, the EU bank, and we are guided by EU policy. And given the focus from the Commission during many years now on supporting the circular economy transition, this topic is very high on our agenda. But we are also the climate bank, and we have committed to dedicate 50% of our lending to climate action and environmental sustainability. And since circular economy contributes to both these objectives, we are planning and have ambition to scale up our support to the circular economy. And in this, we have a particular focus on cities, since we have seen that cities can be both cradles and ecosystems for the circular transition. And like we've heard from previous speakers, they can also be catalysts and support this development. The EIB support circular cities and projects in 3 different ways, and we can take one step forward to have the full picture here. One slide forward, please. Yeah, we take that later then. Lending is, of course, as a bank, the key thing we do, and we can, where needed and justified, blend the lending with grants and with guarantees. We also offer advisory through various initiatives that can support promoters in preparing projects or improving bankability. We have also 2 new initiatives that we are developing together with DG RTD, like Pavel indicated, a circular city center that will provide knowledge sharing, awareness building, but also light project advisory to cities. And then we are going to launch a circular economy technical assistance facility that provide support to project preparation, among others. We've also engaged in awareness building. We have prepared a circular economy guide and a guide for cities called the 15 Circular Steps for Cities. And together with the Hub, who also help us with the 2 circular advisory initiatives, we have prepared the Circular City Funding Guide, which includes information for funders and for fund seekers. In the funding, where we have in the last 5 years provided around 2.7 billion of financing to over 100 projects in 7 different sectors, we have seen that the characteristics of circular projects and promoters vary a lot. We can take the next slide for this, please. And the next slide, please. We can see that they vary with regard to business model, from the more traditional circular value recovery, recycling kind of business models, to those based on sharing, leasing, on product as a service. Products also vary with regard to the promoters, with regard to the size and with regard to the maturity. And the contexts vary also, the technical solutions, the regulatory and the market context, which means that the risk profile are very different among the different kind of projects, promoters that are looking for financing in cities. And the result of this is that many different kinds of financing are needed to meet the needs. You can take the next slide, please. From the EIB, we have tried to look at how our existing instruments meet these needs, but also what is needed to complement these instruments. And we have now quite a wide range of instruments to cater for all these needs. For larger projects with more mature promoters, we offer investment loans, and that is for the larger projects that we appraise and do the due diligence upfront. For investment programs that comprise many smaller components, we offer framework loans where we agree upfront on the focus, scope of the loan, but we are appraising the different components after signature of the loan. And this is a very useful tool for cities, where we're doing a number of municipal framework loans with many cities in around Europe, for example. And a goal is to try to do thematic framework loans, focusing, for example, on the circular or climate action components in a municipal long-term investment program. We can also address the need of smaller projects promoters via other banks in intermediated loans. And we can also invest in funds which then also address the needs of smaller projects and promoters, also those in an early stage of development. But many early stage projects also are in need of grants and equity investments. And the Circular City Funding Guide I refer to provide a lot of information on the types of funding available and the sources of such financing. What we can say with the last slide is that from the EIB, we have, as I said, tried to address the needs of financing. We have put in place advisory services. We have put the awareness building material that will guide cities both in their circular journey, but also with regard to the right kind of financing. So while cities are having access to funding as a challenge, as we heard from the EIB side, I hope it's clear that we are very keen and very happy to support the cities in their journey. And we have various tools and instruments to help in this. And the website on this slide indicate a web page on circular economy on our website, where most of the documents and the links, the website I refer to, can be found. And we also have a dedicated email address where you can address or reach the circular economy team in EIB. So with this, thank you very much. And like Pavel, I'm happy to respond to questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bystrom. And now is the time of another participant to this roundtable. And I give the floor to Sharon Gill, Program Manager Officer of UNEP Paris Office and leads of UNEP work on circular economies and cities. So, Madam Gill, please, the chair is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sharon Hill, and I work for the UN Environment Programme. I lead UNEP's work on circular economy in cities. We would like to thank, first of all, the organizers, OECD, the Green Building Council Italy, and the G20 Italian presidency for the opportunity to be here today. Next slide, please. For those of us who don't know us, UNEP is the UN agency that works with governments in shaping the global environmental agenda. As UNEP, we see the circular economy transition as a necessary transformation for us to overcome the triple crises of biodiversity loss, climate change, and pollution. We believe that the underlying factor of all this is our unsustainable consumption and production patterns, which many of you have already alluded to. When we started looking at circular economy, we saw it from this lens. We used urban metabolism analysis in 5 cities globally to support monitoring of material use. We also understand that a physical as well as a socio-economic change needs to happen to accelerate a circular economy. During implementation, we focused on a few key things, which I would like to highlight here. We looked at reduction of resource use, elimination of waste, as well as an increase in circular activities. Next slide, please. So after that successful implementation in 5 cities, the challenge that we faced was, okay, how do we get from 5 cities to an analysis that goes to scale at the global level? With scale in mind, UNEP analyzed the circularity of about 200 cities globally, still with materials use and circular activities, but we added jobs as an entry point. Why did we look at jobs? Why did we look at employment? We found that an employment lens made it easier for us to look at both material flows, environmental considerations, as well as people, putting people at the center, which is, I think, something that is critical to the circular economy transition. Most importantly, we were also speaking the language of political leaders in cities. As you know, in many cities around the world, political leaders are hard pressed to are always asked the questions: how many jobs are we going to create this year? This analytical tool, which we co-developed with Circle Economy, gave us insights where cities around the world are in terms of circularity. And as you can see in the screen, it's about 5 to 12%. This is a wide range among cities all over the world, and it is preliminary. The results are preliminary, but it is more or less in line with the Circularity Gap Report's global estimate of 8.6%. We found that for each city, the solution towards accelerating circularity is different, but that in each one, opportunities exist for circular governance and innovation solutions. What were the results of our analysis? So we found that a strong relationship between economic diversity and circularity. The more diverse economies have higher circularity score. What does this mean? It raises questions about the idea of building entire cities around a single large employer. Because the tool highlighted people rather than industries within the city, it also made visible economic activities such as agriculture, which is happening outside the city, but whose workers are living within the city. It gave a good picture of economic dependencies outside the city boundaries, which is another thing that we need to look at when we're looking at a circular economy. We also found that opportunities for circularity may be counter to what is popular or obvious to a political leader. Let me give you the example of one of the cities in Latin America, which is a very big industrialized city, but we found that a big chunk of its economy actually finds its foundations within the agriculture sector. And this was validated by the city as well. Next slide, please. Let me go to the more practical aspect of the work. As we all know, COVID-19 has taken a toll on our global economy. In 2020, an estimated 255 million full-time equivalent jobs were lost. However, we also know that a move to circular economy could generate trillions of annual economic output by 2030. A circular economy transition definitely needs to be part of our plans to build back better. How do we do this? We can start building circularity in cities in strategic areas, such as buildings and food sectors. UNEP has developed a buildings passport and food waste index to support these areas. We are now working with Mexico City and Prague to understand in a more granular level the relationship between circularity and the built environment. We need to look at the independency of the cities to economies outside its borders. National leadership is key to circularity. Finally, circular economy, we believe, is also about a change in mind shift in the way we see and plan our economy. We need to start putting people at the center of our economic plans, and we need to try to see how we can encourage individuals and communities to accelerate the circular economy. We're a little pressed for time, so let me close by saying that we in UNEP are here to support governments at all levels in the development of practical and relevant solutions towards circular economy in cities. We're all working towards the same goal, to reduce resource use, eliminate waste, and eventually, and I think this is critical, transform our economy to one that works with nature. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Gilles, and thank you for your thinking. I think it's very useful. Enhancing resource efficiency in the circular economy, it's important issues. And now I think we need to combine all the activities and all the thinking with something that is at the core of circular economy and is innovation. So I give the stage to the next speaker, Sarah O'Connell, City Lead, Ellen MacArthur Foundation, talking about circular innovation in cities. Please, Madam O'Connell.
Thank you, Marco, for the introduction, and thank you to the OECD, the Green Building Council, and the Italian presidency of the G20 for inviting us to participate today. I will indeed talk about innovation in cities, but I will also talk somewhat about the role of city governments and policy, city policy, in accelerating the transition to a circular economy, because it is also interlinked. And so to start with, talking about the enabling conditions to accelerate the circular economy in cities. And in fact, I would argue that these enabling conditions are already here. Our urban centers have to deal with some of the main challenges of our existing linear systems. our existing linear system. And speakers have already touched on these points already. Cities consume over 75% of the world's natural resources. They're responsible for 50% of global waste that's generated and emit up to 80% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions that are generated. And so given that 2/3 of us will live in cities by 2050, we can only expect that these challenges and the associated costs, environmental, economic, and social, will only increase over time if we don't change what we're doing. I think very importantly, cities are at the center. So cities as places are engines of economic growth and bring together a wide mix of people, skills, and disciplines that are vital for innovation. And this mix of people, skills, and disciplines creates then vital centers of culture, innovation, and learning. And so cities are well placed to pioneer solutions for systems change and to demonstrate the transition in practice. The circular economy can play a critical role in addressing the impacts of our current take, make, waste economy. The circular economy can support the creation of low carbon, thriving, and resilient cities, contributing to the delivery of SDG 11, definitely, as well as at least 11 other SDGs, including SDG 9 and 12. And the circular economy can also support us to tackle many global challenges, including climate change, biodiversity loss, waste, and pollution. And so city governments then need to be innovative. They need to be critical first actors in the accelerating the transition to a circular economy. They have a key role to play in building thriving, livable, and resilient cities, where waste and pollution have been designed out of the products that we use every day and urban systems, where materials are kept in use and maintain their value, and where natural systems in and around cities are regenerated. So city governments need to change what they've been doing. We need to change what we've been doing. And city governments can therefore set and manage the regulatory framework to create the enabling conditions so that we have cities that are fit for the 21st century. And engaging diverse stakeholders is a very important aspect of this. By embedding circular economy principles into different urban policy levers, cities can bring about changes to use changes in terms of how we use and manage materials in our cities, to deliver on urban priorities such as housing, mobility, and economic development in a way that supports prosperity, jobs, health, and communities. And so the circular economy can be seen as a solutions framework, giving the core principles from which we design, plan, and innovate from. Touching on some points that other speakers have also made around the challenges, the main obstacles that cities are facing transitioning to a circular economy, I'd like to focus on 3 challenges specifically. Number 1, a lack of city-orientated circular economy strategies. So to change the system, it's really important that we need to accelerate the transition to a circular economy. And to do that, we need to embed the circular economy into city policies to set a common direction of travel. This could look like a circular economy roadmap like we see in Amsterdam, London, or Charlotte, but it could also be incorporating the circular economy into other critical city policies, such as a resilience strategy in Milan or a climate strategy like we see in Lisbon and Sao Paulo. And I also want to note that we don't always have to have large quantitative studies already performed or as part of baselining for circular economy roadmap or city policy setting. Although these can be really, really helpful, qualitative analyses can also help to identify priority sectors and intervention points and can support momentum building. And London's a good example of this. Secondly, there's misalignment within regulatory frameworks. So our existing regulatory frameworks have largely been built around the linear economy. So they therefore inhibit circular economy practices from emerging or scaling. There can also be a misalignment of policy schemes and incentives across different tiers of government. And this creates barriers to the implementation of circular economy initiatives. Efforts like this meeting today to connect across different government tiers can really support the creating of a common understanding and can really help us work towards this alignment building. Policymakers can also create mechanisms in which two-way facilitative feedback loops with businesses and research communities can take place. This strengthens business commitment and can also support policy design and implementation. And as an example, the Green Deal approach in the Netherlands brought together policymakers, companies, and NGOs to provide an open feedback loop as to how policies were affecting circular economy opportunities that were being developed in practice. And then the last challenge that I want to talk about is recognizing that no one actor can change the system alone. Collaboration is absolutely critical, but this is challenging in practice. City governments don't always know how to collaborate with the private sector and vice versa. It's not commonly done. And so looking when we're trying to do new things, when we're trying to be innovative into where public-private partnerships and where these collaborations have happened previously, even outside the world of circularity, and replicating from those examples can be really helpful. It's also been mentioned before that city governments also have significant financial and capacity gaps. So public-private partnerships could be particularly effective to address funding gaps for projects, as well as resource constraints, and they can also be used to continue fostered collaboration between the public and private sectors. City governments can be therefore key stakeholders in public-private partnerships without always having to initiate the process, provide all the capacity and fund the entire project. And the Where Next campaign that the Ellen MacArthur Foundation delivered in collaboration with New York City agencies as well as fashion industry players is a really good example of this. And so when we looked at how national governments can help to further accelerate the transition in cities, I would say that at the national level, there's growing recognition that the circular economy is a cross-government agenda for better growth with multiple benefits.
Yes,
and
Madam Carol, I ask you to go to the conclusion, please.
Yes, I'm right there.
Oh,
so
thank you.
National government policymakers can support the creation of a common direction of travel and form upstream decisions in their capacity to set the regulatory incentives and disincentives. And this common direction of travel, therefore, includes stimulating design for the circular economy, managing resources to preserve their value, supporting the underlying economic conditions and incentives to deliver a circular economy, investing in innovation, infrastructure, and skills, and lastly, fostering collaboration to change the system. I'll end there.
Oh, thank you, Madam Carol, and thank you for your insights. I think we have no time, unfortunately, and space for question and go deeply in our discussion. I hope this suggestion can be helpful for the next steps in this conference. And maybe I can take some point that from every speaker raised. We have an important challenge, and we are all aware about this. We need to respond to the challenge of people and environment and their needs. Cities, for sure, are at the core. They are the key, and they are at the core of this transformation needed. It's urgent we change our behavior to do this. We need to collaborate. Maybe we need to strive a little more, to put more effort, maybe resources, or maybe it's only a matter to better coordinate the international association, the cities, the citizen action to have a greener and more inclusive and sustainable society for all. So I thank you for your effort. I thank you, the speakers, for this panel, and I leave the floor to the next one, hoping that our work will be helpful for this important goal. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to this second session of the G20 Circular Cities Conference. My pleasure to take you to the next panel that will discuss circular economy in practice. My name is Aziza Akmouche. I'm heading at the OECD, the division that deals with cities, urban policy and sustainable development, where the program on circular economy in cities and regions led by my colleague Oriana Romano is located. And it's really a pleasure now to get into this putting frameworks into practice session. We've heard from the previous session the extent to which many international organizations have somehow supported the conducive governance, financing, and innovation solutions and framework to help cities move from a linear to a circular economy. We heard from the OECD, the European Commission, the European Investment Bank, UNEP, and Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And we'll now get into some very concrete examples from different cities from across G20 countries to understand not only the progress that they have made in that transition to a circular economy, but also what they are doing from a very practical standpoint, the main obstacles and headaches that they're facing in this daily job, and some suggestions they would have, because this is a G20 event, some suggestions they would have for national governments to help unlock the potential at the very local level. So we'll use pretty much the same rules of the game, 5 minutes for each of the speakers. We have a good 40 minutes for this session. There is no PowerPoint presentation, which should make things more fluid. And what I will ask the speakers, and I thank them a lot for their participation today, I'll introduce them as they take the floor, is to try to some extent to respond to these 3 questions: how you are facing the transition to a circular economy, what are the main obstacles and challenges that you're dealing with on a daily basis, and to see also whether these echo and provide a reality check to what was said in the first session, and then how you think national governments can help you unlock that potential. And it's my pleasure to get us started with the case of Curitiba in Brazil, and to introduce Chris Alessi, who's the president of Curitiba's Agency of Development and Innovation. Chris, welcome. Thank you for your time. You have 5 minutes to touch upon these 3 points. You have the floor.
Thank you, Aziza. Good afternoon. Thank you, OECD and Green Building Council Italy, for this opportunity to present what Curitiba has done to develop, change, and transform our city into a smart, sustainable, and inclusive city. Beginning in the 1970s, the master plan laid out streets, public transportation, shopping, industrial and residential areas. Today, clean water reaches 100% and sanitation 93% of the population. We have 60 square meters of green areas for inhabitants, and the city offers a range of services near mass transport system. Our recycling program started around 1990, and now we are taking the next steps. Our Smart City program, called Pinhão Valley, is an important governance and planning tool for Curitiba. In 2017, Curitiba became a part of the 5 City Global Network. The 5 cities are committed to developing a new urban model based on local production, circular economy, technology, and innovation. Our Climate Change Forum has the participation of universities, private initiatives, and civil society, in addition to the public sector that originates the Plan Clima policy. One of Plan Clima's goals is to dispose of only 10% of the waste in the landfill by 2050. Today, 50% of the waste goes to the landfill. We understand that the circular economy needs a new perspective of governance. In 2019, in partnership with the European Union, we held an international forum to discuss circular economy and carbon reduction. When we talk about green building, Brazil is the 5th country in the number of LEED certificates. Curitiba has about 20% of green buildings with LEED Platinum certification. Curitiba has proven in several initiatives the importance of the circular economy agenda. The city created the design plan and built a knowledge center to train artisans, designers, and the cultural community. As example of programs that contribute to the circular economy, I bring our Eco-Citizens Recycle program. It uses the concept recycle, reuse, and reduce. The city program organized a group of more than 900 waste pickers into 40 associations with economic support and training. These cooperatives receive more than 1,700 tons per month of recyclable material. Caximba neighborhood is another great social impact project. It is partly located in flood zone of 2 crossing rivers and a protected national park. The project is based on flood management, creating multifunctional hubs for social cultural exchange at the urban green borders. And the Cycle Food Project. It establishes a link between the reduction of food waste and aspects of sustainability. For to happen, we take cooperation very seriously. The local ecosystem is always involved in our programs. Universities, product sector, institutes, startups, small business, NGOs, foundations. And we have many partnership terms with organizations like IDB, C40, AFD, European Union, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, Chevening programs, among others. For next steps, we want to improve our communication, our public policies, and increase the research, development, innovation, and technology to circular products and services, again, a profitable market, and with scale, especially for private companies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris Alessi, President of Curitiba's Agency of Development and Innovation. I think it was very clear from your intervention how you've been leveraging the planning tools to support that transition, and you did mention this master plan, and that's actually a good way to make the transition, you know, something you rethink from the ground up and not only cosmetic in a top-down fashion, but you've also made it clear the extent to which you could set clear goals, including reducing waste in landfills from 50 to 10%. I think that's quite impressive from the time frame you set, and also that shared responsibility and many of the awareness raising efforts that you're leading from the government, but also a broader constituency within this climate change forum. And we could see also from your examples that you've been looking at it through the lens of different sectors, including the built environment. This is something that came out strongly in the survey that Oriana shared earlier, and the potential of green buildings, which on top of the examples you've provided in relation to waste and food, will be, I'm sure, of high relevance to the audience. Thank you very much, Chris. We'll get back to you. I have a few questions. We'll see if time allows, but meanwhile, let me turn to our second speaker, and it's my pleasure now to introduce José Chiasson, who's the Director of Economic Development in the city of Montreal. Montreal is one of the cities where we're doing extensive work these days on this circular economy at the local level. José, thank you for your time, your effort. You have the floor, 5 minutes. What are you doing? What are some of your hot potatoes, and what you would like national governments to do to help you?
Thank you very much. It's a very pleasure to be here with you. Thank you very much for having Montreal with among the panelists. So from our Montreal perspective, I think we believe that the enabling condition to accelerate the circular economy, I would say 4 of them, but there are also many, because there's so many things to it's a very complex topic also. So first, we believe that it has to be, the business community has to be engaged. In Montreal, it's actually the Economic Development Department that is actually driving the process, of course, with all the different services of the city, such as the environmental services and climate change also bureau. But we believe that it has to be the business community that is engaged, because they have to pay also attention to social and environmental issues while they're doing some profit, of course. Second, we need a very clear roadmap. So that's why we are also working with the OECD on that topic. But we believe that we have to have a very structured process, and to also really know what are the opportunities and how we can leverage them. So that's why we are also working on collecting data, analyzing the material flows. We are also targeting the same sector, I think, where there's a lot of potential when we talk about the food market, the residual materials, including the construction sector. There's a lot of opportunity, and also sustainable mobility. So it's all about data also. And the fourth one will be the ecosystem. Like it was said by others, we need to all work together. So we invest also in supporting our ecosystem on a financial level, but also for strategic advice, so they can support businesses towards transition towards a circular economy strategy. So that was the condition, but then we are also facing obstacle. So the obstacle that we're facing, there are many, but of course there's that we need to align all our legislation at the municipal level, provincial, federal. We need to go forward clear and coherent legislation on circular economy. We need to take advantage of this essential and global movement. So this is one. And also we'd say that the circular economy is still relatively unknown. So we need to sensitize all the stakeholders on the best practices to adopt, on the opportunities that it offers, but also on all the legal requirements. We need what we say, we cannot improve what we cannot measure. So we need to establish specific objectives and indicator, as Ms. Alessi already said also. And last thing on the obstacles, we need to go from a personal motivation to a systemic motivation. So it goes also to the ecosystem. So we need to all work together. So finally, with what the national government can help further to accelerate the transition, as Ms. O'Carroll also said, we need to put in place sustainable financing solution, but with the private sector. So we need to do some joint venture in order to accelerate. So in Montreal, for instance, we did a partnership with a private investment fund, which is led by Fonds d'Action. So it's a 30 million first capitalization that will be financing circular economy projects. So that's an example, but we could do that at a global level on the with the government. But also, I would say that we need to reform the legislation framework and support programs. Of course, we need to better integrate environment externality and facilitate the development of new structure that will make it possible to modify the production and the consumption patterns. And finally, but the central government should put in place an ambitious package of measures on the circular economy, combined with generous calls for projects in order to facilitate the circular economy. It will strengthen our competitiveness at the global level, but also promote sustainable economic growth and create new jobs. So So that's it. I hope I was in the 5 minutes time. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, José Chiasson, Director for Economic Development of the City of Montreal. You and Chris were perfect on time, so I think that sets a good example for the ones to come. I think we could see actually in the framework conditions that you named, or the recipes for success, many of the messages that were echoing the takeaways from the previous session. I think your point on private sector engagement here maybe adds to the conditions that were listed before in relation to data, to governance, to the ecosystem and strategic guidance. And I think I take from your intervention that maybe slightly more emphasis on the economic case for that transition on top of the environmental and social cases that were long made can maybe be a good stimulus, let's say, to create emulation. And I think there were very concrete examples on what the national government can do, from legal reform all the way through using public investment to leverage commercial sources of funding, concrete measures and calls for applications, and a few others that are really insightful. Thank you, José. We'll get back to you with a question or two at the end of the panel, which helps me now turn to our third case, traveling towards Europe now with the case of London. And my pleasure to introduce Wayne Hubbard, the Director for the London Waste and Recycling Board. Wayne, you've been very actively engaged in work that Oriana has been doing also on this topic. You have the floor, sir, to take us through what you're doing in London, what are your headaches, and how your national government can help.
Thank you. Before I start, I should say a heartfelt congratulations to the Italian football team for winning the European Championship last night. And that's the last thing I'm going to say about football. So moving on. So London started this process around 2014. We started investigating circular economy. We developed a series of documents towards a circular economy document, and then a circular economy roadmap in 2017, identifying 5 focus areas that are important sectors for our city: built environment, food, plastics, electronics and textiles. And we also identified enabling sectors and have created 3 programs to deliver actions against all of those focus areas in engaging our enabling sectors. And those programs are support for local authorities, where we want to help citizens to and help local authorities to help citizens to revolutionize their relationship with stuff. We have a business transformation program where we want to make the circular economy everyone's business. And we offer funding for a venture capital fund, which has been running now for a few years. And we also offer grants and support and advice to circular economy businesses. We don't offer environmental advice per se, we offer business advice to those businesses. And I think that's an important distinction. And we also support behaviour change, because we believe that Londoners can help save the world one behaviour at a time. And enabling that narrative, I think, is gives citizens a really powerful motivation to take action. We also are quite interested in the concept of consumption and consumption-based carbon emissions, and how the circular economy can help address climate change. And clearly cities are at the nexus of that change, even though the debate globally is around territorial emissions. We're really interested in the carbon footprint that cities have with the consumption on a global level, and how that drives consumption emissions. And we're particularly interested in the work that the C40 have done, and also the work that the Ellen MacArthur Foundation have done on this, and we're trying to put that into practice too. We are part of a recovery effort now, post COVID, hopefully economic recovery effort in London around missions, a mission-focused recovery, and we're interested in particularly the Green New Deal mission. And again, we feel that supporting the circular economy in this area is perfect in terms of addressing jobs, growth, skills, and a resilient recovery. And we're particularly interested in how we can apply that now at the neighbourhood level. So looking right down at high streets and their environs within the city and supporting businesses and citizens with tools to enable them to participate in the circular economy. Barriers, I feel, are, yes, definitely knowledge. Cities are complex. Getting a clear roadmap is important, and making sure that policy cuts across policy areas and doesn't just sit in an environmental chapter in a strategy or document, but seeing it for an holistic systemic change. In terms of national government, cities, I think, need freedoms and flexibilities to be able to deliver policies on the ground. So they need financial freedom and policy freedom. And some cities have more freedoms than others. In the UK context, we live in a particularly centralised system. So that could really help. I feel that cities lead, cities act, and governments talk. Passionately believe that. So we need a bit more talk to enable us to do a bit more acting. Great, that's me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wayne Hubert from London, Director of the London Waste and Recycling Board, and indeed for emphasizing in the concluding part of your intervention some of the incentives that could be set from the national level, including the fiscal space, which we understand varies based on the level of centralization or decentralization, but also maybe for that policy coherence that you need because of the very fragmented nature of the many sectors through which that transition to a circular economy may happen. I liked also very much your point on behavioral change. I think for policymakers, this is something that is equally important, that you need to combine the stick and the carrot, but also emphasize the awareness raising for that individual in addition to the collective action that is needed to change this consumption and production pattern. So thank you very much. We have 3 more speakers to go. We'll try to catch up with time and then ask maybe a final question for the panelists. And let me now turn to our representative from the city of Goa in India. And I'm delighted to introduce Shreyas Ambe, Chief Engineer in the municipality. Shreyas, if you wish to take the floor, 5 minutes. What are you doing in Goa? What are some of your headaches and challenges, and how your national government is or can help? Do we have Shreyas with us? Okay, well then we'll transition to the next speaker and maybe get back to Goa after, and that takes me to the city of Paris now. We have the Deputy Mayor of Paris in charge of the circular economy with us, Florentin Letissier. Florentin, you have the floor. 5 minutes like your predecessors to take us through what Paris is doing these days, some of the challenges you still face, and how the national government in France is helping or could help.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Very pleased to be with you. It's good to sharing experiences between our cities. It's always very interesting and very inspiring. So I will keep in mind some ideas from our discussion that will feed my reflections. So thank you for that. I build these public policies with the goal of supporting circular economy companies that face major obstacles in Paris. The first one, and one of the most complicated, is the price of land. When a company wants to open a zero waste business, for example, or a second-hand shop that gives a second life to objects, clothes, books, furniture, it presents itself on the real estate market and must face up to a very high price per square meter. So these structures, they often have a fragile economic model, at least when they start the activity, and cannot compete with the traditional economy. So we have therefore put in place tools to financially support the actor in this circular economy to gain access to commercial spaces via subsidies, and that is very important. In addition, the development of the circular economy depends above all on the consumption behavior of each of us. It depends on what consumers are going to buy in their daily life, how they will sort their waste when they get home, raising awareness among the general public and supporting changes in consumption patterns is therefore an essential lever for the development of the circular economy. In addition, we have a diversity of actors in the circular economy. It's essential to build the growing momentum for this model. I am very fortunate in Paris to have a rich ecosystem which pushes new responsible entrepreneurs upwards and allows companies to show solidarity with one another. This solidarity is very important in times of crisis, as we have known since the start of the COVID pandemic, but it is also key. Key so that these companies, they are often too small to respond to large contracts, and they have to be able to join forces and pool their knowledge and skills to win major markets. And as a city of Paris, we can help them to do that. But what is also key to accelerate the development of the circular economy in cities is political will, and that is very important. With a strong political strategy, clear and assumed by the elected officials in charge, it is possible to support a strong development of this model by creating tools adapt to the constraints of the territory. Public procurement is also a lever that can enable the model to be massively developed, but which is also very complicated to activate, which therefore relies on strong political will. In Paris, I am carrying out a scaling up strategy for the circular economy, which is based on the structuring of 5 priority sectors, that is to say textiles, electronic equipment, construction materials, zero plastics, and logistics. And I heard Wayne from London, and I think we have sectors in common. It's very interesting. Wayne, maybe we can one day talk about it together. It will be great. To finish, there are some obstacles that cannot be removed at the city level alone, and we must address it to the national government. That it involves changing the legislation in force in order to make good practices possible. And I give you examples. For example, as a public institution, as a city, everything that belongs to the city of Paris is part of the public domain. As a result, we are prohibited from giving it away, as it was funded by the Parisian tax. We do also not have the right to give to companies specializing in the reuse of computer equipment and of life computers from the city of Paris. And we have so many computers in the city of Paris that we could give, and we don't have the right to do it because of the legislation. So it's very problematic for us, and we would like to that this regulatory framework change. It's very important. That was an example. I could give more, but maybe one another. For example, in buildings, we are not allowed to reuse false ceilings because they must be validated as fire resistant. And this certification is only given for new materials. So it's also a big problem in this field for circular economy. I hope you have understand me. I'm not very professional in English, but I did my best, and thank you for hearing me today.
Thank you so much, Florentin. This was perfect and also within the time allocated. So thank you very much for your help, Florentin, Deputy Mayor of Paris in charge of the circular economy, Florentin Letissier. And I think your emphasis not only on the potential through entrepreneurs, SMEs, startups, and the way as a city government you are incentivizing somehow that local fertile ground for the transition to materials materialize, but also your emphasis on the need to address some regulatory barriers that are maybe generating a counterproductive effect, or at least not allowing the local government to unlock completely the potential for that transition. I think on both standpoints with the examples you provided, that speaks a lot to the audience. Thank you very much. Let me now turn to our last speaker, and it's my pleasure to introduce our colleague Luca Montuori, the Vice Mayor of the City of Rome, who will share with us the perspective of the U20. For the audience that may not be aware, there is actually a mirror group to the G20, which is called Urban 20, and puts around the table the mayors from the G20 countries. And you've paid a lot of attention over the past years to that conversation on the circular economy. We were really thrilled to partner with you. So, Luca, thank you for being with us. And if you can share with us the takeaways from that group and maybe the insights from Rome, and stick to the 5 minutes, and then we'll smoothly transition to the next item.
Okay, I hope to stay in the 5 minutes. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here. I've been Sherpa in the Urban 20 in the last couple of editions, so it's very important for me to share ideas and information and good practices with cities, because I think that cities will play a very important role in the development of the future. So I am Deputy Mayor even for urban design, so I will propose a point of view about recycling the city that is very important for us to stop soil consumption, because we know that in a few years, the 75% of world population will live in the cities. So soil consumption and reusing the cities for us is very, very important. So today we are discussing about circularity and reuse. And we know about buildings, that buildings must be designed according to the principle of circularity. And circular design is one of the assets of buildings today, and looking at the life cycle of the buildings and so on. And many international companies are working on that. So what is very important, and what I would suggest today, is a reading that is not alternative, but complementary to this. And I think that what we can give from Italy to this discussion is in this context, is to use together the idea of heritage and reusing heritage as an asset for the future. So it's the authentic reading we can provide in this discussion. So many historical buildings in Rome and in the center of the city need to be reused. They are changing their use, they are changing their functions, and the needs of people that work and live inside them are changing. So we don't need a museum city like Rome. No, we need an evolving city. So it's very important for us to recycle the existing city. So regenerating the historic city is a complex issue, and we are working on it. For example, in the Reinventing City competition, we worked a lot about existing cities, brownfield, and reusing it. So we are trying to be part of this process, working not only on construction materials, but even thinking about how we can deal with this heritage, how we can, of course, deal with an idea of economy that imagine that it's easier to build a new building than more restoring an old one. So we need to realize good performances even in restoring building. For that, we need to share knowledge, even with all this research work that is very important in this issue, that is to control all the different phases of the building from the project to the realization. For example, like international protocols like LEED, JBC, that are working even on heritage building as an important asset of their research. So we need specific tools. Coming to the question you made about governments and what are the difficulties we are finding. We need specific tools, a dialogue with the world of research. We need innovative elements. We can introduce them in the city, not to derive from standardized solutions. We always know, we have standard solution for sustainability in building design. No, we need specific solution, and we need to measure this specific solution. This is what we have to search about. So we are very interested in new projects, and we are working even with private investors in projects that are dealing with this, and with international protocols of controlling design from production to realization. How can national governments provide and accelerate this transition is the question, because cities need more powers, at least in Europe. We need power to dialogue with large investment funds, with stakeholders, in order to develop balanced growth policies for growth. So we don't need, as I said, we need to deal with them, to discuss which functions are the best, reusing the city. We don't need all working places in the center of the city. We don't need only hotels and tourism. We have to discuss, we have to regulate the market in some ways, and not only receive proposals that follows the market. So I think that this is what we need. We need an historic center of our cities that are not centers without inhabitants, only tourists, only offices. We need to know that reusing the city is not just a matter of money, it's not just a matter of bricks, it's a matter of feelings that have to be transformed into spaces. And to live in these spaces will let grow economy, and will let the city more circular, of course, and will stop, of course, soil consumption, and will help the cities to grow in a more balanced way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luca Montuori, Vice Mayor of the City of Rome and Sherpa to the U20, for sharing those insights and that emphasis indeed on building and decarbonizing building, and the extent to which that transition to a circular economy can help is very timely, not only because of the share of money that is devoted to that in ongoing recovery packages, but also because the future urban paradigm changes that we are seeing with teleworking and the shift from commercial to residential buildings, and many conversations around the future of workplace and so on are generating also more distributed liabilities in that energy transition. So indeed, very good points. Thank you very much. I would give a last try to see if the representative from Goa has joined us, Shreyas Ambe, the chief engineer. If you're online, just shout and I'll give you the floor. And if you're not, and knowing that we started 12 minutes late, but I would like us to hand over to the next session so we don't accumulate too much delay, maybe I'll give a final 10 seconds for each of the speakers, and really reminding you that this session is meant to provide this bridge between local governments and national governments for that discussion on the circular economy. And maybe my question to you is, what is the one message or plea you would like to make for national governments to unlock your potential at the very local level? Maybe we start with you, Chris, no more than 10 seconds each, so we can close in a minute, please.
Oh, thank you. I think we need to change the way we produce things, and I think the circular economy, there are thousands of jobs opening then. We need to improve our policies for this. I think all ecosystem needs to work together.
Okay, so greening jobs, skills upgrade, and driving that transition as well. Good. José from Montreal.
From Montreal, we would say that we need a perfect alignment within our different circular economy plans, so at the municipal level, provincial and federal, and in order also to consolidate our value chain and to create the maximum value of it.
So multi-level governance, in particular for a federal country like Canada, and making sure there's no split incentives or misaligned strategy across local, state, and federal levels. Point taken. Thank you very much. Wayne. Over to you.
Yeah, it's really important that to accelerate a circular economy, we have a symmetrical relationship between civil society, business, and government, and everybody has to play their part. If there's an asymmetrical relationship, this won't work. And what that means is government needs to set the outline and create the conditions in strategic level for cities to be able to deliver on the ground, which means give us the powers, the responsibilities, but set the rules in which we operate.
Okay, combine the regulatory and strategic framework with the on-the-ground implementation and that triangle between people, policies, and firms. Point taken. Florentin?
Yes, I'd like to say that France is a very centralized country. I mean that state is very powerful, but cities, they need to have more powers, more money to work on local solutions in circular economy, because it's the future. And the problem in France is that the state is so much powerful, and it needs to be a bit more balanced. That I would say that, yes.
Okay, fiscal and administrative, then decentralization or capacity. And last, Luca from Rome.
Yes, I am on the wave of Florentin. I think that Europe is a network of cities. We should look at Europe really not as a system of different states and nations, but a system of cities, and really a network of cities, as it was, let's say, before modernity. And cities has to work as a unique megalopolis, not as separate poles in a network, but as a unique element that deal altogether with the problem of sustainability and future development. Otherwise, we will not success. And some steps we made in the last days, even with new rules about controlling great networks of economies, are in this direction. We have to do it more, and we have to share cities as knowledge and competencies.
Good, thank you very much, Luca. Indeed, and some potential out there for city-to-city partnerships to upscale individual bottom-up efforts. Let me thank all the speakers for your time, for sticking to the rules of the game. I know that was not easy and certainly not doing justice to the magnitude of your work in different cities, but I think the audience could get a very nice overview of very practical solutions you've implemented. So thank you for your time. This closes the session on the circular economy in practice, and we will slowly now transition to the next session where we will learn from different G20 countries' experience and broaden a bit the base. Thank you all very much, and over to the organizers.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are, and welcome on session 3 of the G20 Circular City Conference, learning from G20 countries' experiences. My name is Oriana Romano, and I'm leading the OECD program on the circular economy in cities and regions. I'm very happy today to moderate this session and welcome several representatives from G20 countries willing to contribute to the session by sharing their own experience in how they are supporting the acceleration towards the transition to the circular economy in cities at local level. I would like to kindly remind the speakers that they have 5-6 minutes each to illustrate how they do this in their own countries. And without further ado, I would like to pass the floor to Mr. Hervé Bois-Guillaume, head of the International Urban Planning and Housing Mission at the Ministry for Ecological Transition, France. Mr. Bois-Guillaume, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Oriana. Hello to everybody. I would like to thank Laura and Lamia for their intervention this morning. They have presented the axis for reflection and action on circular economy. A national policy in France on circular economy is based on a multi-partnership action linked with a roadmap for circular economy we have launched 3 years ago. I would like to make a focus on circular cities, which is the question of today. And I would like to focus on a presentation of a few national programs we have launched in order to help cities to promote circular economy schemes. One first example of such a program is called Eco-Quartier, Eco-Districts. This program is in the hand of mayors. They have to take 20 commitments to be labelized eco-district on how to manage a project, how to include sustainable development goals, how to have low carbon and circular policies in their achievements for this district. It's a very big success in France with more than 600 districts labelized, and some of them are in cities abroad, particularly in Japan, in Colombia, in Tunisia, and we have a few cities programmed to join this label in Africa. The second example of a program we have launched 4 years ago is called Industrial Demonstrators for Sustainable Cities. We have 23 pilot sites in France with several topics. I will take 2 examples. The first one is called Rêve de scène urbaine. We can translate it in English with Dreams of Urban Scenes. It's in the village, in the future village of the Olympic Games of Paris 2024. And the objective of this industrial demonstrator is to have a low carbon and circular district for the Olympic Games, and to have programs on innovations, use of new technical innovations for energy efficiency, for slow mobility, for low carbon energy and mobility. The second example I will give, which is very linked to circular economy, is called Cycle Terre. In English, it would be Earth Cycle. It's an industrial demonstrator created to promote the reuse of excavated soils we are producing with the construction of a new subterranean circle metro around Paris. And of course, it is aimed at having new innovation with such use of earth. The third example of program for circular cities is fitted for medium-sized cities in France, which is called Action Heart of Cities. It is aimed to fight against the loss of attractivity of our medium-sized cities. It's a program with financial, technical, and administrative help from the state to launch urban requalification of city centers with objectives of fighting against soil artificialization and also to increase density in those areas of cities. The fourth example of national program is a special fund we just have launched within our national recovery plan for urban action on former deprived lands, industrial, railway, military zones. And the objective is to have in priority urban requalification action on those soils which are often in the center or at the margin of the earths of our city centers. And I would like to finish with the fifth program we just have launched, which is called Territory of Innovation. One concrete example of such territories is the territory of La Rochelle city, which will be the first zero carbon pilot site in France in 2040. The objective of La Rochelle is to have new actions on energy, on mobility, and on circular economy to be low carbon with a strong decrease of emission of greenhouse gases. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bois-Guillaume. Very interesting inputs on the national programs beyond the roadmap that was defined, as you said, 3 years ago. Several initiatives to boost innovation in the circular economy, initiatives, but also funds in relation to the green recovery, and the link across different kind of agendas, having as a common target achieving a carbon neutral economies as well, and so acting through the circular economy, the energy and the transport as a means to an end, the end of reducing greenhouse gases emissions, especially in cities where people live and can be mostly affected from environmental and health consequences indeed. Thank you very much for sharing your experience. I will now pass the floor to Mr. Arnaud Passanier, Strategic International Advisor on Circular Economy at the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management, the Netherlands. Mr. Passanier, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to share with you the experiences in the Netherlands on circular economy, especially in relation to cities where a lot of networks are very active in finding new solutions, finding new innovations to technical, but also social innovations to tackle the issue of transforming our economy to a circular one. What is key is that we have to look at networks. So it doesn't matter if there is a local or regional or a national government. There are small and medium and big enterprises working along with each other, learning from each other, strengthening each other in the value chain or between sectors even, and especially creativity is very key to solutions. So what we did in the Netherlands is not only starting with the national program on circular economy, working together with companies in a raw materials covenant, but also to sign a city deal, which is a special green deal. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation talked already about it. It's a deal between the national government and cities and regions to make it possible to find each other easily, to learn from each other, from new approaches, from best practices, etc. But also to share monitoring systems and to harmonize it. So we are developing indicators, methods to monitor, And we developed together a circular toolbox, which can be used by local governments, but also the local actors. And what especially is our mindset is that the national government is a partner. So we are not defining what should be done on the local level. We should cherish the local initiatives to see how a local ecosystem can be created. And especially cities are ideal to make those new creative innovations and scale up to the market. So what we so it's in the end a bottom-up approach, but where we can link each other and strengthen each other. To mention two examples of ways the cities showed that there is a lot of interesting developments which can be replicated elsewhere, is the eco parks. It's a sort of industrial symbiosis where one company produces waste which can be used as a resource in another company, but in an industrial park. So no need for a lot of transport and energy consumption. The other one is we promote also from the national government the creation of circular craft center, as we call them. And that's a sort of combination of a collection of household and company waste, but also creating new products, etc., with reuse, repair, refurbishment, repurpose on a local level, and showing that to the public. So that's a means to show that products can be reused again and with high value. And that's a really promising development which we see. And I stress that freedom and flexibility, as Wayne Hubbard told, is essential. And therefore, we are really reluctant with national guidelines or regulations. If the market says we need those regulations, okay, we are there to help. But it's that way and not the other way around. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Passanier. We heard a lot about the national programs in relation to the circular economy promoted to build capacities, but also to learn from one another, for example, through the city deal, linking the national and the local experiences. Thank you for highlighting the role of cities as the key players for social innovation, as a transformative hubs, as a place to build ecosystem for new creative innovation centers, and for making for highlighting the fact that reusing, refurbishing, repurposes are all these kind of activities that are possible in cities and also at different scales, and this can be done indeed through the support of the national governments. Thank you very much for sharing this experience. We'll now pass the floor to Mr. Novrizal Tahar, Director of Solid Waste Management at the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, Republic of Indonesia. Mr. Tahar, thank you very much for joining us. As the previous speakers, you also have 5 minutes. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Oriana Romano. Thank you for OECD for this forum. Very good afternoon and good evening in Indonesian time. It is my honor to be here to share Indonesia experience in accelerating the transition toward the circular economy, especially regarding solid waste management. Indonesia has adapted the circular economy concept into Vision Indonesia 2045 and has been incorporated in our national medium-term development plan to 2020 until 2024. To accelerate a transition toward the circular economy, the government of Indonesia has developed the integrated policy or regulation and strategies from upstream to downstream. In solid waste management, the upstream policy is focused on strengthening and broadening waste minimization program action by community through zero waste living and waste segregation and treatment at source, as well as implementing the extended producer responsibility or EPR through the roadmap of waste reduction implementation by the producer that's stipulated in Ministry of Environment and Forestry, including limited of usage of the single-use plastic. The objective of this roadmap is to guide and facilitate the producer, including brand owner, manufacturer, importer, retailer, and food and beverage service industry to implement the responsibility on reducing the waste that generate from their good packagings and services in form of plastic, paper, aluminum can, and glass. For the midstream, the government of Indonesia has issued a joint decree of 3 ministers. This joint content an agreement on the joint preparation of the roadmap in the context of accelerating the availability of the raw material for the industry as substitute for imported raw material which focus on plastic and paper groups. Currently, the government of Indonesia also developing policy to encourage waste to electricity approach and waste to energy approach. The government of Indonesia has released presidential decree on waste to electricity in 12 areas in Indonesia. Also, the government of Indonesia is developing waste treatment facility using RDF, refuse derived fuel technology. It's been plotted that 52 locations of coal-fired power plant and 34 locations of cement kiln in Indonesia. As a conclusion, I would like to emphasize that the government of Indonesia put its serious concern on accelerating the transition toward the circular economy. We fully aware that circular economy needs to implement it by collaborating with all stakeholders, government institutions, researchers, private sector, informal sectors, as well as people who work individually or jointly in resource management area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tahar. Very interesting intervention that brought to the attention of the audience the need to look at not only at the downstream phases of waste management for greater resource efficiency, but also at the upstream through waste minimization and EPR implementation. Thank you also for highlighting the need for collaborating across stakeholders, public, private. You mentioned the formal and also the informal sector. So these are all elements that are very important to show the different levels of progress and efforts towards the common goal, which is the circular economy for resource efficiency and better material management for the future. Thanks a lot. And I will now ask Mr. Al-Shaibani, Deputy Minister for Water in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, also to share his experience. Thank you very much and welcome to this session. We are very happy to have you here with us, and I invite you also to share your experience in 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Al-Shaibani. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it, and thank you for the invitation. And I will be glad to talk about the water side or the treated sewage effluent side and use within the circular city approach. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and I would like to thank the Italian presidency and also our colleagues from OECD for organizing this important meeting on circular cities. You all know that global urban population and economic development are growing probably at a rate that in some countries or in many countries that rate exceeds the natural resources capacity and sustainability. So we need to rethink our strategies in managing the natural resources and optimizing their utilization. So the traditional linear economy approach in this regard will probably take us nowhere. We have to think circular in order to ensure the integration and maximization of natural resources utilization and reuse across all its functions in collaboration with cities, businesses, and the research community. Ensuring an adequate amount and acceptable quality of water is, as you all know, fundamental for achieving sustainable development and also achieving the sustainable development goals. The circular economy concept and model can optimize resource use and reuse in the economy and minimize the generation of waste. So in this context, the circular economy model for water resources primarily focuses on more sustainable practices of using wastewater and other marginal water sources. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, as you probably all know, is characterized with arid environment. We are limited in the natural water resources, especially the renewable resources. High population and urbanization growth rate. Around or more than 80% of the citizens live in urban areas. The kingdom has witnessed significant socioeconomic development over the past 4 decades. In 2016, the Kingdom Vision 2030 as a strategic framework to reduce the country's dependence on oil, the dependence of economy on oil, diversify the economy, develop public service sectors such as health, education, infrastructure, recreation, and also the water sector and tourism. In light of the Vision 2030, the Ministry of Environment, Water and Agriculture has developed the National Water Strategy 2030 in 2017, and that is already being implemented, and several of its goals have been achieved. The vision of the statement reads like sustainable water sector that develops and safeguards the natural resources and also safeguards the environment of the kingdom, providing cost-effective supply and high-quality services at an efficiency that contributes to the economic and social development in the kingdom. The National Water Strategy has 10 programs to achieve the objectives by 2030 and also has well-defined clear performance indicators, key performance indicators to be met. The treated sewage effluent use or reuse is central to implementation of the circular economy model because water plays pivotal role throughout the economy and supports sustainable resource use and offers options to face water shortage. The interest and consideration of treated wastewater use in the kingdom can be traced back in early 1970s, where in order to elevate or raise the public acceptance, a group of Islamic scholars issued some kind of declaration that encouraged the use of treated wastewater for certain purposes. This declaration elevated the social concerns that the public or officials might have concerning the use of treated wastewater. Following that, comprehensive programs were developed and implemented to use treated sewage effluent for landscape, agricultural irrigation, and in most of cities in the kingdom. Right now, many uses, whether it is what we call controlled irrigation or landscape or industrial for mining and other industrial purposes, depend on treated sewage effluent. The National Water Strategy and the new water law in Saudi Arabia that has been issued just last year give the legislative cover for the reuse of the treated waste water. Right now, the percentage of treated waste water is around 20%. We are planning to increase it to 70% by 2030. Plans are underway. The city of Riyadh, for example, produces around 1 million cubic meter per day. Part of it is already in use, and there are plans under development for the use of the treated wastewater in initiatives like the Green Saudi initiative that some of you are aware of. City of Al-Hassa, for example, in eastern Saudi Arabia, uses around 250,000 cubic meter per day for agriculture. We plan to reuse around 5 million of cubic meter of treated wastewater for different purposes by 2025 or 26.
Mr. Al-Shaybani, I invite you to conclude, please.
Okay, so the final note is that given the importance of water availability and quality, the kingdom, during its presidency last year, adopted the G20, or the ministers of water adopted the G20 dialogue on water, which was proposed by Saudi presidency. We have launched a platform for sharing best practices. We are working with our Italian colleagues to organize a dialogue on water later this year, and we hope that we will have the chance to see most or some of you during that event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for sharing this perspective, focusing on the water sector in particular to achieve more sustainable practices for wastewater reuse in particular, and your target of achieving 70% to 2030. Thank you a lot. I will now would like to invite Ms. Jane Naishida, Acting Assistant Administrator of the Office of International and Tribal Affairs. Ms. Naishida, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you very much for being with us. I would like also to hear your view on how countries, the G20 countries, and in particular the United States, are supporting cities in accelerating the circular economy transition. Please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. And what I'd like to do is to perhaps answer some of the questions that were raised in the second panel from our city experts. I know that the city panelists have raised a number of issues. So if I could try to answer them in the context of the U.S. perspective, I think the first question or point that was raised, the importance of ensuring that as national governments develop our policies, that we look at greening of jobs, and that from the U.S. perspective, President Biden has made in terms of our efforts to build back better after COVID, ensuring that we have green and sustainable jobs as one of his priorities. The second point that was raised was the importance of synergy between the relationships between governments at all levels, as well as with our private sector and with NGOs. And again, this is something that the U.S. strongly supports, that we realize that in order to achieve a circularity in terms of circular economy, as well as circular cities, that it involves all levels of government, and that it involves all stakeholders, including the private sector and NGOs. The third point that was raised in the second panel was the question in terms of the role of cities and their authority and their power. As you have heard from some of the panelists today in this panel, that many of our national governments recognize the important role of cities. In the United States, for example, we have given the role of sustainable development to our city and local governments. They have initiatives like Smart Growth, where they're trying to incorporate and meet the vision. So it's not necessarily the national governments who are setting the policy, but is in fact the local governments, and the role of national governments is to provide the resources to support their efforts. And then finally, the point was trying to look for opportunities for city partnerships. And I think you heard from this panel just now some of the innovative approaches that are being adopted around the world, including from my good colleague from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the efforts that cities and local governments are doing in Saudi Arabia for water efficiency and water reuse. I think these are lessons that could be learned in other cities around the world. So I think that proposal for a city-city partnership is a very good one, and one that we can all learn from. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane Nishida. Very good way of concluding these sessions on highlighting the important role of the circular economy as a means also to create opportunities for green and sustainable jobs, but also to enhance partnerships efforts across the cities and of course across the levels of government. Just allow me, perhaps if we have 10 seconds, really to ask a very last question to our panelists. So if each of you can give us in literally one or two words, what would be the major thing that you would need from cities to advance towards the circular economy agenda? I will ask Mr. Bois-Guillaume to respond first.
Maybe the more important thing is to have a political will from the municipality and an action between the municipalities and the state level to engage jointly on those programs.
Thank you very much. Point taken. Mr. Passenier?
Yes, you can make a lot of plans, but come into action and show that it is possible together. That's it.
Action following the planning and the strategies. Mr. Tahar?
Thank you, Oriana. I think in Indonesia we have president regulation, so we have to put the target in 2025. We can manage 100% the waste in Indonesia. So it's the mandatory for the local government. Thank you.
Implementing the law in Indonesia, local level for waste management. Mr. Al-Shaibani?
Okay, thank you very much, Oriana. I can take more than 10 seconds to cover this, but I will say probably legal and legislative procedures to give the legal framework, taking integrated approach, encouraging investment and the private sector, and comprehensive communication strategy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Al-Shaibani. And of course, last but not least, Ms. Nishida.
I guess I would just like to follow on the first comment from my colleague from France is creating that political will, but creating the political will in terms of public awareness and empowerment, so that our national leaders, in terms of not only in the executive branch, but in the legislative branch, understand the importance of what the local governments are doing, because quite often that is where we see some of the obstacles, is not understanding the importance of their efforts. Thank you.
So political will and also the importance of dialogue and public awareness. Well, thank you very much for this enlightening and very interesting session. I thank you very much all the speakers and of course the audience for listening. I close the session number 3 here, and I invite you all to stay with us for the next session on the OECD report on resource efficiency and circular economy, and the conclusion by the G20 Italian presidencies, moderated by Marco Mari from Green Building Council Italy. Thank you very much.
So welcome to everyone. We are at the last session of this important meeting. So today we witnessed a beautiful and productive international discussion, a symposium on knowledge, and we all need to strive for greener, more inclusive and sustainable cities for all. And we are aware about the important role that play in the transition to a circular economy and more general sustainable development, and we all must participate to these activities. For this reason, it's my great honor to introduce this conclusive session of the conference. And it's a pleasure to introduce the presentation of the OECD report titled Towards a more resource efficient and circular economy. So I present Mr. Shardur Agravala, Head of the Environment and Economy Integration Division, OECD Environment Directorate. Mr. Agravala, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murray, for the kind introduction, and thanks to the Italian presidency for this opportunity. So as Mr. Murray mentioned, I will be presenting the report that we have prepared at the OECD for the Italian presidency towards a more resource efficient and circular economy. This report would be launched at the G20 Environment Ministerial on the 22nd. The focus of this report is broader than the topic for today's conference. So it includes circular cities, but it has a much broader perspective, as I will be showing in the next few minutes. Next slide, please. You can click 3 more times. So to give you a broad context on the need for a circular economy, I'm starting with what would happen to the consumption of materials if we don't undertake more ambitious policies towards a circular economy. According to our projections, and these projections were done in 2017, and we were projecting a near doubling of material use by 2060, but the trends are very different depending upon which countries and which materials we're talking about. So for the OECD countries, as you can see, that the material use is projected to less than double, although there will be significant increase in uses of certain materials, particularly non-metallic minerals, which includes construction materials, but also metals. If you look at the BRICS, we do expect a continued rapid increase in total material use over the next decade or so. And after that, the rate of increase of material use is going to slow down. But we still expect a very rapid increase of certain types of materials, most notably metals, which is the part you see in turquoise. And for the rest of the world, what you see is that they are starting from a relatively low level in terms of total material consumption now, but the rate of increase of material consumption is going to increase very rapidly, and different materials would increase they'll almost triple or quadruple by the time they reach 2060. And this is in part because a lot of the infrastructure in many of these regions is still to be built, and that's going to cause a very rapid increase of material use. Now, of course, we don't care in the end about tonnage of materials. What we care about is the consequences of the material use. One of the consequences is greenhouse gas emissions linked to the material cycle. Next slide, please. Sorry, so this, before I come to the consequences on greenhouse gas emissions, let me also just zero in on the G20 countries. So G20 countries constitute roughly 75% of the total material use today and 80% of the greenhouse gas emissions that result from the material cycle. And this is why any action by the G20 countries to move towards a circular economy will have significant environmental benefits, not only for those countries, but also for the rest of the world. Next slide, please. So now I'll be talking about the link between material use and greenhouse gas emissions. So in 2011, according to our estimates, almost 45% of total material use was linked, of total greenhouse gas emissions were linked to the material cycle. And projecting to 2060, next please, you can see how the greenhouse gas emissions linked to the material cycle would grow. If you could click 3 more times, please. So 9% of the total greenhouse gas emissions are associated with just 6 key metals. 12% are associated just with concrete. And by 2060, we expect that almost 50 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent would be emitted as a result of the materials management cycle. So this is one of the arguments which moves in favor of moving to a circular economy. Now, next slide, please. Now, greenhouse gas emissions are only one environmental impact. We have done cradle to gate type of life cycle assessments to look at environmental impacts of different kinds of materials. And what we find is that these impacts are across several dimensions, not just greenhouse gas emissions. They relate to different levels of toxicity in land, on water, and also in terms of particulate emissions. And while these impacts might differ from one material to the other, one message that's consistent across the board is that the impacts in terms of the environment are significantly a lot higher when we're talking about primary materials compared to secondary materials. So you see the impacts of the same material on primary is the top panel and secondary is the second panel. And if there is an environmental case for a circular economy, this is it. Because when we move towards greater use of secondary materials, we reduce significantly environmental impacts across the board. Next slide, please. So there are a number of ways in which we can transition to a circular economy, and ultimately the broadest definition is that we are trying to close different material loops. But the key message here is it's not just the material loop we are trying to close, we are trying to preserve value of the material as long as possible. So the goal is to move to closing of the innermost material loops, which preserve the maximum value for the longest period of time. So here the loops which are about repair, remanufacturing, and reuse are much more valuable than closing material loops like recycling, for example. And then, of course, we can also close loops within the use phase through models like the sharing economy, or within the manufacturing stage through models like industrial ecology. And we can also have renewable materials used as inputs to the production process. So there are several ways we can move towards a circular economy, and these different loops have given rise to different kinds of business models. Next slide, please. So these are 5 of the key circular business models. The first is referring to the use of circular or renewable inputs. The second business model relates to converting waste to value. The third business model is about extending the lifespan of products. The fourth business model is what I call the platform models, for example, for facilitating the use of products. And the final model is, instead of having material products, we are replacing it by a service. And you have icons and many famous companies which fall into many of these business models. Now, a key point to note here is that while all these innovative business models exist and they receive a lot of attention, if you look at the market penetration of these business models, currently the penetration is extremely limited. Next slide, please. So these are some assessments which we did based on secondary literature, looking at different kinds of circular business models. And we tried to collect what information we had in terms of penetration of these business models. Now, in some isolated examples, for example, like chemical leasing, we did find significant market penetration rates. But for a majority of the circular business models, according to our review of the available information, the market penetration rates are less than 15%, sometimes much less than 15%. And this clearly means that there are significant bottlenecks which limit the scale up of these business models. And this is where public policies come in terms of how to enhance the scale up of this tremendous innovation that is happening to a large extent driven by the private sector. Next slide, please. So now looking at the G20, and now I'm not talking just about cities, but I'm talking G20 countries as a whole, there's been a lot of attention towards enhancing resource efficiency and in recent years moving to a more circular economy. And national strategies for sustainable materials management, resource productivity of the circular economy have been launched in various G20 countries. And you see the covers of some of these strategies on the right-hand side. And sometimes they may not be using the same terminology. Sometimes it's resource efficiency, which is emphasized more. Sometimes it's circular economy. Sometimes it's sustainable materials management. But the key point is that most countries are moving towards taking a life cycle approach towards materials management and the environmental consequences that result from it. At the same time, when we look at G20 countries as a whole, it is important to recognize that resource efficiency and waste challenges differ across the G20 countries depending upon the country's context, economic structure, and stage of development. In particular, if we look at some of the emerging economies within the G20, there are still significant challenges in terms of waste collection and recycling infrastructure, for example, and these need to be addressed together with the move towards higher value loops. So that is a bit different from some of the more advanced G20 countries where the challenges of waste collection and recycling are significantly less. Now, there's also been a lot of action at the international level. The G7 has an alliance on resource efficiency. And of course, the G20 has been having its annual resource efficiency dialogues for the past several years, both to share experiences and best practices, but also move towards more collective approaches. Next, please. So while a lot of this progress is really encouraging, I would like to summarize three key challenges. There is, at the policy implementation level, we still have a very fragmented policy landscape, which is focused on addressing specific materials, specific products, specific life cycle stages, or specific market players. Next, please. So there's a challenge of integration and coherence between policies. Next. And if we take such a fragmented approach, there's always the risk of shifting the environmental burden from one location, one country, one medium, or one phase of the life cycle to another. So what we need are cross-sectoral policies as well as better international coordination. And this is where G20 can play an increasingly important role. Next, please. So here are some of our recommendations for the G20 towards moving towards a more common policy vision on resource efficiency. So we would recommend mainstreaming resource efficiency and circular economy principles into domestic policies, promoting resource efficiency through a policy mix covering the full life cycle of products, aligning sectoral policies with resource efficiency objectives. This includes trade policies, innovation policies, investment policies, and so on. Aligning COVID-19 recovery measures with the resource efficiency objectives. Now, there's been a lot of attention on greening the COVID-19 recovery, and we have looked at the attention to different green objectives in these recovery plans. And while there's a lot of attention towards greenhouse gas mitigation, there's considerably less so on resource efficiency and circularity. And this is certainly one area where G20 countries could perhaps devote more attention. Strengthening policy development and evaluation through better data and analysis is absolutely central. And then taking a stepwise approach to transition from waste to resources. And this is where the heterogeneity of the G20 bloc comes in. For some of the emerging economies within the G20, the waste side is still quite central and needs to be addressed while we move to the higher value loops. And finally, fully leverage the role of cities. And that's been very eloquently brought out in the context of the discussions we've had this afternoon. Next slide, please. And this is my final slide. So one is what G20 countries can do domestically and lead by example. The other issue is what they can do through international coordination. And here, in terms of international cooperation and using G20 as a forum, I would suggest supporting businesses in value chain management, which obviously cross national boundaries, harmonize environmental labels and information schemes, alleviate barriers to trade and investment in environmental goods and services to ensure the diffusion of best available environmental technologies, and mainstreaming resource efficiency and material recovery into official development assistance more systematically. And with that, I would like to conclude, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Agravala. Despite a few minutes of presentation, your speech gave us clear information, maybe too much clear information. And the OECD report showing us the need to go towards a more resource efficiency and circular economy. And now, last but not least, the conclusion of this conference to Madame Laura D'Aprile, Director of Department of Ecological Transition of the Italian Ministry of the Ecological Transition. Please, Laura, take the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you. First of all, let me thank all the participants to this meeting and all who contributed with their comments and intervention and also with some observation on what we discussed and presented. The first good news is that we are all going in the same direction. There is not so much time to act and react if you want to reach the sustainable development goal, and also if we want to really contribute to the decarbonization goals. We all recognize today the discussion went into this direction, the role of cities in the ecological transition. And of course, we want all a just transition, taking into account also social aspect and helping the ones that had the most rude consequences of the COVID-19, that is to say, women and young generation. So we have to take into account in this ecological transition also this social aspect. It doesn't matter so much what definition of circular economy or ecological transition we use, but we intend, of course, the same things. And for it, we know that the exchange of experiences and case studies and also practical tool that we have today is quite important to go in the same direction, because what we mean and is the same object, we are going toward the same goals, and we will find on the way a common language, of course. Some lessons learned from the discussion of today. We need, first of all, political will to reach the ecological transition and to have a circular development of cities. In this direction, of course, the empowerment and the awareness on these themes towards citizens, towards the young generation, towards politicians, political level, and all the government level is quite important. We need financial support for all the initiatives, since we don't have at various government and local level the same financial tool to implement the circular economy paradigm and resource efficiency tools. We need cooperation and coordination. This is quite important, very important, between different public and private actors, but also and above all among different government level, because every country has its own organization internally, and we have to support the political will through coordination and cooperation. Also, regulation is, of course, important, but we need smart regulation, not binding regulation, since the ecological transition is technically evolving very fast, and we don't want regulation that keep this technical transition and evolution in a step in a step behind. So these are the main conclusion of the conference we had today, and these are the lessons learned that we will bring with us in the G20 exercise in order to reach this common view on circular economy vision and the resource efficiency vision, and to share this very strong priority with the other G20 members and delegates. So I would like to thank you, the OECD, and the Green Building Council for the great efforts, and of course our friends from the G20 countries and organization. Thank you very much.